So there are a lot of Bible translations for those of us who speak English. When I study, I take advantage of many of them and I can bring them all together and I come up with what I need. But for my daily driver, for the one that I do my devotionals in, the one I memorize, the one that I preach from, well, I use the New King James Version. So here are 6 reasons why I use the New King James Version and why you might want to use it as well. Now, before we get started, it's really important that I tell you this right off the bat. It's a disclaimer. And it's this. By no means, God forbid, may it never be, I remember where we've heard that before, I am not advocating at all any sort of onlyism. No onlyism, zero, zilch, nothing. Okay, I'm not saying that we have to only use the New King James Version, and I'm not advocating that for any other Bible translation, especially the King James Version. So no onlyism, none at all. Now with that out of the way, now's our opportunity to take a look at these 6 items that we were talking about earlier. So item number 1, sound effects. Formal equivalence. That's right. Formal equivalence is my first benefit, reason for using the New King James Version. So formal equivalence, what does that mean? That's such a fancy word. It is. It really just means word for word. The translation is done word for word. So there was a committee of a number of people. It was a pretty significant number of people. Let's see if I can remember how many it is. I'll maybe right there. There's a number. That's how many people were on the committee. And they've decided to translate the New King James Version in a way that is more word for word than it is paragraph style or paraphrase. So that's the reason, that's the number one reason I think in my mind why I use it. So word for word has its place. I made a video talking about Bible translations and you can check it out and see if I can put one up here. You can click that and that'll tell you all about Bible translations and the difference between formal and dynamic equivalence translations. So number two, that's 4, 2, there we go, 2, is that it uses updated English over the King James Version. Now, I love the King James Version. I read from it still regularly, but some things are just hard to understand. Like, quit ye like men. I think Mark Ward had talked a little bit about that specific one. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean? Anyway, in the New King James Version, we typically don't have to worry about stuff like that. The English is updated, and when you read it, you don't have to go to a dictionary somewhere else to understand what you're reading. It's all there. I mean, the King James Version, sure, you can see that as a benefit that it causes you to go to the dictionary, but why do all that work when you don't have to, when somebody else already did it? That's the way I'm thinking. Item number 3. The New King James Version uses italics in a rather unique way. You know, italics, when letters are straight, but then they crooked them, that's italics. So the reason that the New King James Version uses italics is because when something is translated from the original language, I'll use Greek for example, sometimes they need to add words in order for that translation to make sense in the target language. And so when you see those words in italics in the New King James Version, you know that those words have been supplied by the translator. Now, I happen to like that. And again, I think that is a great advantage to using the New King James Version, is that you can see when this occurs. Now, I know other translations do something similar to that, but most of them do not. So that is a benefit to specifically the New King James Version. Number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 4th reason why I use the NKJV, the New King James Version, is that its text is stable. No, not that kind of stable. What I'm talking about is the general likelihood of the text being changed due to changes in the way we use language. So I'd like to use an example here from the English Standard Version, which, by the way, is a great translation. I like it a lot. It's my 3rd favorite after the King James Version. there were a number of revisions since it was released in 2001. So the ESV was released in 2001. Some minor revisions. I think there were maybe 500 or so word changes to keep up with the times. And it was released in 2007. And then another revision occurred in 2011. And then another revision in 2016. And there's very likely going to be future revisions. So you could have an ESV Bible from 2001 and somebody else could have it in 2011, and there might be some minor differences between them. The NASB is a very similar thing, just maybe not as intense as the ESV. So the NASB was released in 1971. It had a revision in 1995, and most people who have an NASB have the 95. And there's going to be a revision, or has been a revision again in 2020. So that's kind of all the rage right now, that and the Legacy Standard Bible. But we won't touch that. I don't think we need any more English translations. So the New King James Version came out in 1982, was revised once in 1984, and that was it. And there are apparently no reasons to go in and change anything or to revise anything further. The text is going to remain very likely the way it is for, the foreseeable future. So that's a stable text. That is a pro instead of a con in my view. So that's one of the reasons I use it. So number five, I think people tend to make a bigger deal than it really is, in my opinion. But the New King James Version is based off of the traditional, the same sets of manuscripts which the King James Version has been based off. So if you are a Textus Receptus person, the New King James Version will work out great for you. If you're a critical text person, i.e. you want modern Bibles which are translated from some of the newest discoveries in the manuscript tradition, then you would want to go with something like the English Standard Version. Again, it's a great Bible. It's very similar to the New King James Version, just that slightly different textual base. Now, is that a problem? Probably not. It's very likely that you're going to run into more issues with interpretation than you are going to run into with manuscripts. And finally, number 6. That's right, we are on the last reason why I use the New King James Version. I'm sure there's more, but here's the last one for now. 6 is that the New King James Version contains marginal notes. Yes, that is really exciting. You have no idea, actually. So what that means is if you are using both an English Standard Version and a New King James Version, for example, one that uses the critical text versus one that uses the traditional text, the New King James Version goes out of its way to tell you when it differs from the critical text and when it doesn't, or when they agree. Or in the Old Testament, it gives you examples in the margins of where the Hebrew Masoretic text is slightly different than the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the scriptures from way back yonder, 300 BC, somewhere around there. So this is a plus for me, especially when it comes to studying the text and sermon prep and for teaching prep and stuff like that. It's really good to know what the differences are between your translation and some that other people may be using who are going to be listening to you. So there it is. 6 reasons why I use the New King James translation and why you might. If you don't like the New King James translation, or maybe you like something better, why don't you go ahead and leave a comment below saying which translation you prefer, and maybe give us a reason or two why you like that translation. Until then, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and we will see you next time.